2012, the Future Working Together tribe framed their vision for the future of work in the book Foresight's 2025. They conceptualized the power of knowledge networks coming together to orchestrate change and enact strategies. They probed into the concepts, knowledge and purpose work, and they personified the roles that artisans of thought would play during this shift.
In this moment in time, Kelly and I have found our calling and purpose work. We are in service to build community and go farther together using human centric design.
Some of you have faced this question already this year. What would you do if the thing you were most good at or experienced at doing went away?
Or thinking about that in other way. Are your strengths and most valuable talents currently at work in your vocation? Are you doing what you love and do best?
Today, we're working with the knowledge that COVID-19 recovery will cascade along with other dynamic orbital forces already at play in our global economy before the pandemic.
Digital transformation, energy transition, the fourth industrial revolution, and rise of the conscientious individual are all pushing us to face the true nature of duality and complexity in our worldviews.
The next 25 years will not be for the faint of heart, but take stock in knowing that we are ready for this.
Never in our modern history have we been so well positioned or technically equipped to apply our self agency in the world.
Using the storytelling approach to strategy, Acorders seeks to juxtapose power and resilience amongst individuals through strategy enactment. Do you feel it? The demand to innovate and change course is here now.
We ask ourselves, how might we address the people facing these demands head on? Might we be more and do more together in creating the solutions that will be both address our changing world needs while also our human condition?
And so then we ask, how will this transformation take place? Neha and I are asking, how might we pioneer and bring other artisans of thought into the fold with us?
This is the calling and unfolding of our campaign. When the pandemic hit, we were wrapping up the 2020 MS in Technology Commercialization program at UT Austin McComb School of Business. Newly schooled in human centric design and ready to practice our craft, we suddenly found ourselves facing an economic crisis.
Over the summer, Neha and I began turning to one another and using the storytelling approach with strategy to experiment on world constructing. Our interest was in self-starting, how to ensure that our knowledge and craft would be applied in the world.
We found these strategy sessions activated our cautious and subconscious thought to work more closely together and while also elevating some of the anxiety we were experiencing.
We felt empowered by this, and we saw the value that we could create with it. Neha began asking me, how might we bring this out into the world and might we build community around it?
The anatomy of our campaign begins with workshopping. We believe that strategy is at the heart and essence of being human.
Recall, we identified orbital forces at work in our world construct. We then considered our network and found individuals that were channeling efforts in the glide paths of these forces.
We know them as orchestrators or fellow pioneers. We workshop our approach to world constructing with these strategy buddies.
We formed social contracts and we released recorded interviews in the format of our Vlogcast Strategy Social.
We release strategy challenges and invite creative expressions with our artifacts.
We construct a multiverse with world constructs and then take and move ourselves 30 years forward in the world views. Neha and I place a high value and importance on diversity of thought. So we're seeking opportunity to workshop with pioneers in public and private spaces. This effort includes corporations, small businesses, startup ventures, and other types of strong bonded networks.
The global smart education and learning market is forecasted to grow at 18% growth rate following COVID-19.
We act with purpose and
Yeah, right.
studying the ethical and sustainable drivers that will push this growth. At the end of the 6-month campaign, We will have collected enough observations and information that we will release our white paper on the project 6 months following the end of our campaign.
In the spirit of a social campaign, we are not exchanging monetary value on this project, but we are accounting for value creation in the pay it forward model, forecasting a cost to value expenditure of $25,000. None of us knows exactly what the future entails. This project is about orchestrating and arranging the components we can influence and harness together. Where we go from here will be in part maybe depend on the efficacy of our call to action. We might Accorders become, after the social campaign, a nonprofit or a service or a digital solution application maybe. Kelly and I are leaning in and ready to do the work in order to find it out.
This is maker culture at work. We are calling on entrepreneurs to join the fold, artisans of thought, test your ideas alongside us. We are calling on raw and emerging talent. Are you needing to make a shift from transactional or process work to deep knowledge work? We want to help you get there. And one more thing, Neha and I place a high value on optionality in our lives and our work. For me, I want Acorders to help orchestrate my life's work in commercializing and bringing new industrial technologies to market, reshaping our world while addressing the human condition. We ask you, what does your purpose work look like, and how can we help?
And at this point, we would love to invite any questions if you have any so far.
Kaylee, Neha, that was a great overview. I was wondering, how do you see your vision aiding people with strategic decision making in today's volatile environment? I mean, people are kind of in decision making overload. How does this construct, or how do you see the construct helping people? You named two groups, I believe, in your conversation. So would just love to hear your thoughts on that.
That's interesting, Norma. You asked the question that way. I was reading just before coming on today a interview with Jeff Bezos, who was talking about living in the future about 2 to 3 years out. He was talking about how all of his decisions preside there, and how all of the senior managers that report to him live as well in that place with him. And then he was segueing into a conversation about juniors and the firm, and how there's this tendency to want to model your decision making and your persona to your senior. That brought in a whole context regarding, one door versus two door decision making. And essentially what I got out of it was a connection I had made previously with work on subconscious and consciousness, and how that is tied into our goal attainment. And so what Neha and I are working with is this idea that if we can help tool people out more in long game strategy, that it's going to then synergize and create glide paths between their consciousness and subconsciousness, and help them to be those leaders of tomorrow that can be living in that 2 to 3 year period out from their current day to day. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Wonderful. At this time, I'm going to stop sharing so we can go more to the gallery mode and conversate there.
Also intend to collaborate with artists and creative minds and strategists, of course, to build a deep knowledge network to evolve our campaign and work forward, right? So there are many ways one can participate here in this campaign, and maybe by being an orchestrator, by being a pioneer, or being just an enthusiast who would be participating in the sessions, in the knowledge delivery that we are planning to do here on this platform. And yeah, again, further explain about the, this segregation that we have created. Kelly?
I'm also really pleased to introduce you all to Kevin Matthews, the second here. He is our first case with a pioneer. So what we've done is we've done a workshop now with Kevin, and he's also one of our spotlights for our Vlogcast Strategy Social. So coming out of the workshop, we did our exit interview, and we released that as an artifact for our campaign. Moving forward, we'll be doing that iteratively. Our goal for the campaign is to do 6 total, 3 with orchestrators, 3 with pioneers. So Neha, do you want to describe and make those roles really clear between the distinctions on orchestrators and pioneers?
Yes, yeah. So a pioneer will be able to seek and express views on the orbital forces that matters the most to them. Kevin, in this case, was we were deep in conversation on the financial strategist, the recovery from COVID-19. So that was the orbital force that he picked to discuss with us, and and how these pioneers see them translating in the futuristic world construct to positively impact their life and the society as a whole is the concept of pioneer that we are putting forward. And and the orchestrators will this is a different category that will have an opportunity to be the guidelight to offer their views to the participating groups for channelizing personal and social reforms that need refining of personal strategists, right? So somebody has a tremendous years of experience handling or managing any kind of orbital force that aligns with our forces, or anybody who wants to make change in the society of any kind, right? The technological change, the political change, the social change, right? So that person will be called as accorders. That is the segregation at this point. And enthusiasts will be simply the observers of the workshops, and will be gifted an opportunity, obviously, to participate after sharing the topic or orbital force of their interest. They can be easily be a pioneer if they think that they align well with the orbital forces that we are trying to push forward. And the team will be workshopping with them to exercise storytelling approach to understand how their past, present, and planned strategies around that particular orbital force would help individuals and society to be better.
And so if we're going to think about ways to pioneer or ways to orchestrate, ways to be an enthusiast, as a pioneer, if you're somebody who is already working with deep knowledge work or purpose work, you're already working in that capacity of artisan, of thought, we invite you to, one, consider, do you have 2 to 3 or up to 5 people in your strong bonded network that you would invite Neha to come in and do one of our world constructing exercises with? We would really welcome and invite that opportunity. It helps us with the observations and the information that we're looking to gain while we're executing on our social campaign. If you're an orchestrator, we would also like to make the invitation to workshop with you, because we see the value of doing the exit interview and having you spotlighted on our vlogcast series. Ways to be an enthusiast, it's really organic. It's about responding to social media posts. It's about spreading the message. There's going to be a call to artifacts that we make through the next 6 months. And in that call to artifacts, we're going to be giving strategy challenges out to the network, saying, for participation, this is what we're looking for. This will help bring people along with some of the ideas that Neha and I are experimenting with.
Yeah, and we assure you that in any case, whatever you want to be in this campaign, however you want to contribute, it will be a co-benefit associated with that participation. And obviously, all the contributing individuals will have access to the social network of strategists this campaign is, bringing together. And obviously, Accorders is growing exponentially as a lasting grid of strategy buddies willing to help each other sustain, advance, and succeed. So that is one of the very prominent benefit that we are trying to emphasize here. And one of the major goals of the campaign in itself is to be standing as a strategy buddy for each other to help organize, recognize, and appreciate and advise. So yeah.
So Kevin, I would like to put you on the spot for a minute. Could you give the group here some feedback out of the workshopping experience?
Sure. So I definitely enjoyed the workshopping experience. For me, it kind of gave me a much more narrative approach to what I do currently in the financial space. I'm an entrepreneur, a writer, and a financial planner. So my job is to make sense of the financial world and help to provide strategies and planning solutions to others, and to be able to take a narrative approach to understand who I am and how I create strategies. But also, it gave me a way to view my clients and what they may be experiencing and allow me to create a much better plan, a much better strategy, a much better story to help them navigate the current situation.
Thank you for explaining that. And when Neha and I were brainstorming in our ideation phase of the campaign, we, naturally turned to Kevin because we saw a person who, one, had demonstrated his abilities with self-agency and some of the pivots that he's navigated through in his life. But two, he was one of the most cunning, articulated people in our class in regards to being able to actually express with conviction and articulate really well. And that articulation is very empowering to oneself, but also to those around you. And so that's one of the reasons why we were really interested in Kevin being our first pioneer.
Yeah. And I think every individual here, like Kevin, like Terry, we kept speaking with over this period of time, will definitely benefit from the heterogeneity of thoughts being discussed during the campaign workshops and interviews about social, financial, or technological, or even the sustainability strategies to improve the personal and social well-being for all of us as a society. And and I think there will be ample amount of opportunities to emerge as a pioneer from where you start, like, at the enthusiast level. And I think we all can contribute in some way or the other. I think we all have strategic minds since birth is what I think. So, yeah.
And I really want people to leave understanding that this is about bringing the science and creativity together, right? So what we identified is that moving forward, human domain is going to be taking on new meaning in our world. And we're interested in tapping into that shift and experiencing what we can do with bringing some of that forward, and synchronizing it with other demands of innovation coming on, hence us looking at those orbital forces. So anyone we haven't heard from at this point, we really invite you to give us some of your thoughts on what you've heard today.
Matt here. I was just going to say, I think it's quite interesting. I work for the Provincial Innovation Agency up here in Alberta in Canada, and I like what Kevin was mentioning as well about the different kind of perspective it gives you with regards to finances. Because one of the challenges I'm seeing with our organization right now is that we seem to be obsessed with ROI and almost kind of vanity metrics, rather than what we used to be, about 4 or 5 years ago when I first started working for the organization, which was really trying to help entrepreneurs and innovators develop new technology. So, and I think as we kind of get pushed towards that show value for dollar type of conservative kind of bent that we've got here in Alberta right now, I think we're kind of missing some really kind of interesting opportunities because we're only looking at them from a very much more strict financial aspect. So I like the idea where you talk about potentially maybe bringing in some more of that shared experience into that decision-making process, because I think we're drifting away from that, and I think it'd be quite useful to bring it back.
I like that you're touching on the decision-making piece. That's something else I've been seeing discussed quite a bit online is, this crisis of decision-making that people are sensing in their organizations right now. And in many ways we are advancing and moving forward cognitively, and the conscientious individual is standing up and moving in the world. But it's messy. It's messy going through transitions. It's messy innovating. And so this is really about how we can channelize our efforts together and make what can be slow be smooth, and then be fast through being smooth.
Kaylee, I do have a question. So as part of this journey, just kind of like our, military decision making, it's like we always look at the history. We study the history to learn what the history happened, and how they reacted to it. And then we learn snippets of that in order to drive what the strategy will be for the future. Like, for example, when you talk about, you tied in COVID quite a bit, right? How can we forward look as to what we should be doing 3 years from now and stuff, right? So, and you tied in that COVID. What about, like, if you do tie into that COVID, identify, what are some of the history learnings from, other pandemics that has happened in history, and what they did, and tie it into what we should be considering for the future, strategy as to what we should be doing, right? So, and the same thing with anything that you do is that you want to also look at history a little bit in a global scope, and then tie that into what you would like to consider and then strategize for the future.
So I'd like to respond by giving y'all some more insights into our approach with the world construct. What we do in the workshop is we sit down and we start with the self. And this is an introductory workshop at this point. The reason we're starting with self is over the summer, I had taken a course in future planning, long game strategy with storytelling, and the facilitator for the course, he, bless him, he was really doing everything he could to help fix this kind of concept in people's minds about how to use storytelling with scenario planning or long game strategy. And I found some really intelligent people really struggling with this during the course. I mean, it's just not easy, knowledge to pick up. What I came out of the course thinking about with Neha was how and why that happened the way it did. So we were looking at it being about the self, about starting with that enacting of a persona strategist, and then how that persona strategist then looks, thinks, feels about the world. Big thing to touch on there is intuition and feeling, bringing those things together and the empowerment that they bring whenever an individual enacts their consciousness around those lines. So then after we enact that persona strategist, we develop a world construct view that is current for today. To Sharon's point, it's always important to think about what came before and what's coming after. And so then we start to exercise our minds and pushing out in 10-year increments to try to build out that 30-year worldview. Why do we do that? Why 30 years? 30 years is the generational shift. It's at 30 years of your age, you're enacting on strategies that were in play 30 years ago. You're acting out in the world with a wealth of knowledge that has come together, and you're exercising your consciousness by that age on the world. And so that's where we see that 30-year time period as being really crisp and really important to this process. But then it's about backwards planning. It's about pulling that 30-year worldview back. And so to Sharon's point, that's when historical perspective also becomes very valid there. What you want to do is consider your orbital forces that are at work on your world construct. These are externalities, external forces. A lot of times this is what they get called. You want to then consider your trends that are moving against or progressing those orbital forces. And then that helps you as you're thinking about and you're pushing your mind out in those 10-year increments, then you really start to kind of look at the data a little bit differently. Gives you different vantage points, different perspectives. And so that's what the approach is about. It's about unfolding that.
Speaking of generational shift, I have some thoughts.
Yes.
So keeping in mind that what you mentioned earlier, that articulation is very important. Moving forward and expanding, I guess, what I'd call your audience to a younger generation. This kind of goes in line with what Neil was saying about the way that you present things being confusing. Using a presentation that introduces the concepts of the campaign by utilizing like very heavily jargonistic terms that are then explained further with other jargonistic terms kind of alienates people who would either be new to a field that could be heavily conceptual, or is new to anything that's entrepreneurial in nature. The whole like fear of self-starting is already deeply laden with fear of the unknown. So explaining things in terms that sort of use very evocative pathos language can sort of further instill that fear.
Appreciate that point. Yeah, I think, yeah.
Kevin, you have something to add there?
Yeah, having gone through the workshop and listened to others, I have a few points of, I guess, feedback.
Mhm.
So the because I too had it took me a second to understand, okay, this is what orbital forces means and here's how it applies to me. But also in the financial industry, I see myself more of a translator and a storyteller. So I try to take whatever chart, take whatever graph, take whatever, high level ratio and make it very concrete to who I'm speaking to. So when I went to the workshop and you guys talked about origin story, that's something that I clearly understood and that really clicked for me. And I could understand why my origin story and how I am a personal strategist can affect X, Y, and Z from now to 30 years out. But also making things a bit more relative or relatable in terms of storytelling. Like I think that you should have a story as we're bringing this, as we're like rolling this out. For example, just sitting here, a lot of this, and this didn't come out when we did the original one, is the Queen's Gambit, which is about chess, which is a strategy game, but her own origin story affected the way that she played chess. And perhaps there's a way to either tie that particular story in or something similar to say, this is why we're taking this approach. Here's what orbital forces are, and here's how it allows you to move the pieces throughout life or some sort of metaphor that way. I think it makes it more concrete and easier depending on what level and what group of people that you may be speaking to for your audience.
Thank you. So I want to say that in regards to the candid feedback we're receiving here, thank you all, because this is going to make us better as we're iterating on this opportunity to share a story. And so in regards to the campaign messaging, the campaign story, if you will, I appreciate everyone coming in on this because you are acting this out right now. This is a living story that we're acting out right now. In regards to how that is speaking to you all, if there's anybody that would like to speak out at this point, we're really interested in hearing how you might be responding and internalizing that message.
Okay. Hi, I'm Veronica. Um, I would like to say that so far, I really like what it is that you guys are putting out and what it is that you're trying to do. My question.
But I think I heard your question, Veronica, which was the lanes and the ways to pioneer, the ways to be an enthusiast, and how organic is that movement. So,
Yes.
so what we will be doing coming out of our town hall event, Neha and I will be structuring some Google Forms that will detail our charter, and it will then give an opportunity for you to elect into being an enthusiast or being a pioneer. And so depending on how you self-identify in that, then there is a social contract that is tied to each one of those roles. With orchestrators, we approach and we invite orchestrators into the network. With pioneers and enthusiasts, we see the opportunity for somebody to go back and forth in those roles. Like you were saying, that's pretty organic. As an enthusiast, I like the way Neha coined it earlier, you're an observer, you are participating with the story in the form of social media, but in regards to being a contributor of content, not necessarily. As a pioneer, we see you as being that person who may already be working in knowledge work, working as an artisan of thought in the world. And so you've already self-started yourself along that trajectory, and we're looking to you to maybe enact others on that path, maybe then interact with enthusiasts in that capacity. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Great.
I've got two sort of responses. On the first, a part of the presentation that I do really appreciate is the focus on the oncoming shift in both cultural trends and career trends. I think that's a very, very important thing to sort of emphasize, that you're being both aware and working within the space of, especially for extending your audience to sort of the younger generation. People my age are very, very aware that things are changing and need to sort of evolve, as what was previously considered orthodox employment is no longer stable, you know. So I do appreciate that greatly. And then on the second, I have a question. What is your goal or sort of thought process on creating these different like labeled roles within the campaign? What is the I guess what you're trying to evoke from that?
So we did discuss $25,000 cost to value expenditure for the campaign. So if we were exchanging monetary value on this campaign, this is what our campaign costs would be at this point in time. We're looking at doing this in the form of a social campaign. So we're exchanging social value with one another. And so having those defined roles allows us to study that that exchange of value in a more monetized sense, which then we can take further into the real world application of business. And so Neha and I, we are working, this would be considered, pre-venture work, if you will. And at the end of our 6-month campaign, we will then stop the campaign. We'll work on our analysis of our information that we've gathered, and we'll release a white paper. The white paper then will take us further, and we will then be articulating what we do with that pay it forward model of that, the cost expenditure on the campaign.
And to add to that, Tristan, so the agenda of doing this segregation is because not every individual might be willing to, contribute up to certain level. So we wanted to also, some people would like to maybe just observe because they are enjoying the workshops, they are enjoying the work that we are doing, they want to promote it, right? So that is the segment of enthusiasts, right? Pioneers are the people who would like to really contribute in terms of views, in terms of strategies, in terms of how we can basically make these changes happen in our social and cultural environment, right? What they think about whatever, I'm using orbital force one more time here, I'm so sorry, but based on any specific orbital force, what they think that their knowledge can help us and to the society to envision that change, right? So that was the reason we wanted to segregate the segments. And obviously the orchestrators will be at the top, right? People who have like tremendous amount of expertise, like Norma, like Cherry. These people have worked in the industry for so many years that they can contribute really well. They can advise us, they can guide us, right? So not just for the campaign purpose, but overall for the improvement of the society. So that was the reason we wanted to just segregate these 3 segments.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Hey, so with Matt, he mentioned that he went through a session or several sessions and learned a lot. I'm just curious, what was tangible that you actually adopted in how you view and you manage your clients as far as the financial planning?
So Kevin, that was directed to you.
Oh, sorry. I thought it was Matt.
That was a lot. For me, it's just taking more time to understand the story behind the client. So I often ask a lot of non-financial questions of my clients just to understand like what their goals are. But I take a lot more time to understand the story of how they got there. This falls into the field of behavior finance a lot more, which has an emphasis on how people spend their money and what they decide to do, even though it may not be the most prudent financial thing to do. So for me, it's really having not just a financial inventory session, what's your credit score, how much do you have, where you want to go, but making sure that I take the time to understand their story and start to create a strategy around there, because that's what's going to drive, at the end of the day, that's what's going to drive their financial decisions.
So I know you're doing the interrogation aspect of it, right? But what about like as far as the portfolios that are available out there in order to best support what you've gathered and learned from your clients? I'm just curious as to how exactly what was it that just triggered and turned the light bulb on when you actually went through the sessions that you and Kaylee and Neha, you guys have gone through this program, and then what was it that really just helped you in order to kind of design, how your method and process in, you know, working with your clients, and then being able to forward look and forward anticipate or even project as to their financial goals and stuff, and then balance that with the packages that are out there and stuff to kind of give me an idea as to what was it that you learned that was able to do above and beyond what your standard training is as a financial planner.
Yeah, well, I'll say it's what I learned and what I'm practicing now, using now, is that it's not so much the portfolio or the balancing or even the investment selection. That is something one can do, but that's not, I found from working with this and from learning from others, that that's not actually the driver in the personal finance sector. So that's point one. Point two would be, when we talk about understanding the story, we're looking at the broader context. So for example, we know mathematically that it is more important to save for retirement than it is to pay off student loans. However, the context and the stories, at least the clients that I'm working with, which are usually that millennial generation, there is a pull to pay off student loan debt in an aggressive manner. So it's sitting down and understanding why is that the case, and understanding the story around that, which for many of those who graduated between 2008 and let's say this year, since there's another pandemic and recession, understanding like, okay, I see it, why that's the case. How can I, as a financial planner, make sure that you are managing that debt in a way, but not sacrificing your retirement to do that? So that's a part of the storytelling that I had to understand. And also tell a story to clients and say, look, I understand where you are. I understand the story that you're telling me, but also let me tell you a story about those who from 2008 who didn't save for retirement and how that ended up for them. Here's how we can work to manage those goals together.
So something that I wanted to touch on from our workshop, it was really impactful for me whenever you were making the correlation on the firestorm movement and the shift that's taking place with millennial workers looking to not plan for retirement, but just simply plan for growth. And that part of that planning for growth is about being able to use the working capital that they have today to not simply look at a 30-year plan to retire, but also looking at how that can actually move them forward on their ambitions and goals in the next, near term, right? And so part of that was in that 30-year look. It's really about that 30-year look again, having that ability to help canvas that out with an individual. As an individual is making a shift from a traditional employment relationship where they passively could save for retirement by just simply contributing to their 401k, our world's getting a little bit more complex now. And this helps someone like Kevin as he's advising people through this shift.
Yeah, that's really helpful to kind of tie in what you guys are saying.
Thank you, Sharon.
Yeah, good job, Kaylee and Neha.
I'd like to say everything that was sort of said there from utilizing a more narrative approach to not just financial advising, but say any career field, sort of utilizing those interpersonal skills. Funny enough, is sort of what applied anthropology is all about, is taking that social, contextual, historical approach, sort of a holistic view to any field, and understanding that no problem exists in isolation. So I think that's a really, really, really strong thing to emphasize, and I would argue that you might want to emphasize it further in your initial presentation, building that interpersonal skills or and that narrative telling of the 10-year, the 20-year, and the 30-year plan, is very, very important in any field, but especially anything that's entrepreneurial in nature. And I would go as far to say is that that's one of the most important aspects of the town hall today.
Thank you. And I just want to come back on that for a moment, Tristan. In the pitch, we were talking about the anatomy and the unfolding of our campaign and our campaign story. I want to again just say that everything we've touched on here today, every contrary idea that's been presented or critique that we've received, it's very much serving Neha and I as we're looking for human-centric design to be our focus. We need really sharp news feeds, or say the feed to the human. So this has been an opportunity to bring everybody in for this moment, to enact our story, to be active participants in it, and to get that feedback. So again, thanks for all of this, everyone. So we're coming up on 10 minutes to the hour here. We'll be wrapping up here pretty soon. Before we do, I did want to go once more around the table for any last thoughts, any lingering comments.
Can I say a few things?
Please.
Good stuff today. Lovely group. Really appreciate being here. A bit of a solution looking for a problem, but I think a lot of the elements in the dialogue were emerging. I would offer to really listen to what Tristan said, because I think what's happening right in front of our eyes, like we talked about the other day, is we are about to experience the greatest shift in humanity in our history over the next decade, because we're literally changing our relationship to what we've called work. That, like we talked about the other day, we're moving from a world of having a job and working to having a purpose and consciously creating in community and understanding how to find your tribe and to find your next indicated step. But I'll go back to what Kevin had to say, because that's kind of the critical path through everything to me, because we've got to solve what I call the calling compensation dynamic. In other words, how does somebody find what they're called to in their heart, and how can they meet the immediate need of having, whether it's marching up Maslow's hierarchy of needs or whatever it may be. But the first thing they're going to worry about is, how can I be compensated for this so that I can be taken care of on a physical level? So it's a matter of this group being clear on its purpose and articulating its vision and its relevance to anybody that would receive it. In other words, what we talked about the other day, what's in it for me, what's in it for us, what's in it for the one, and to be able to walk up that with an ROI all the way. In other words, don't make it convincing, make it compelling that we're stepping into a new world of completely shifting our relationship to what we think work is. And I won't get too psychological about intrinsic motivation and an internal locus control, but they really are everything, because we're moving from a world of people doing what they feel they have to do to a world of what they truly want to do. And that gets really, really, really messy, because you have to delayer a lifetime of conditioning, to get back to a lot of things that can create the blockage of them. Because I've said before that you're not going to have the luxury in the future of having anything less than a 100% intrinsically motivated team or organization, because you're paying people salaries and only utilizing maybe 50 to 55% of their talent and their potential and their ability. So, and that's why I've come to the conclusion with everything that this is all going to move in the direction of what I'm just calling conscious self-leadership. Because if we don't have the native organic ability in the future to be self-referential of knowing, what my gift and core talent is, and how I bring that into the world and the value of that, and be able to articulate the value of it and the return on the investment for compensating me to add to a value and to a revenue stream, you're not going to be at an advantage in the workplace. So Tristan has to know how right he is. That's a wave we need to ride, because people ask, that's why I came to the conclusion about conscious self-leadership, because it's not going to just require lifelong learning, but lifelong, what I call lifelong knowing. In other words, you've got to be able to assimilate real-time knowledge experientially to get to the wisdom of knowing how to utilize that knowledge very quickly. It's not just having the knowledge, so that you can walk into any environment, and I always say go where you're invited or know where you belong. But it's just having that ability to become completely, I'm not talking self-absorbed or narcissistic or anything. It's just, like what I talked about the other day, purpose is nothing more than the focused, energetic expression of our uniqueness in service. In other words, how do we take those gifts and uniquely bring them into the world to evolve the human condition? And that's what's going to be required of people as they awaken, because they're not going to, the why is out there, like I talked about the other day, The words, the work, and the wordless. I mean, all the words have been written and said. It's now time to do the work, and what does the work really look like? Because the hard message to deliver to people is, you may say you want to get to the summit of Everest and you're looking at the brochures in a nice warm room, but what's it going to look like when you get to base camp 4 and you've got a summit at 11 o'clock at night and walk across the death zone? I mean, you've just got to have that ability to really stand in your conviction about your purpose and what you're bringing to the world and articulate its value added to any organization or team. So I would offer for all of us to think about, in this mosaic of defining the problem as our shifting relationship to work at the individual, organizational, and actually the economy is being rebirthed as we speak right now. This post-pandemic economy, or I call it life beyond the Trump-demic, but I mean, it's like, what is this really going to look like? And it's just, these are going to have to be attributes that we all have. I mean, education as we know it is disappearing extremely rapidly, but most people don't understand that, what's really happening. And so I just want to make that comment that all the pieces today, for me, were here. All the pieces are here, but it's a matter of coming back and building a vision on a quilt.
Thank you. Yeah, we were saying that too. It's about organizing and orchestrating the components we can control and influence with one another. So,
well, it's in consciousness, they call it the hard problem. And I call it, with this shift, the hard problem. Everybody knows what they want to move from, but few people know what they want to move to or how to do that. And I think that's this team's job, is to really, and Kevin, and Tristan, and Neil, all of you, you've got it. It's just a matter of being able to articulate how that process will work and move people from workers in a job to people on purpose, consciously creating to that vision, and not thinking anymore about, I have to find a job. You're now thinking about, how do I co-create my purpose in authentic community? So that's what you're thinking about. Thank you for listening.
I'd like to say that Terry and Norma were co-authors to the book I was commenting on at the beginning of the call. So Foresight's 2025 Future of Work. That's something that really resonated with me as I was making my transition, leaving active duty in the military and pivoting out for the very first time in a role, commercial business. I was thinking about, what I was really diving into. And while I felt really prepared after I'd gotten my Master's of Science in Supply Chain Logistics and my PMP, and had been networked with the Veterans Network into a role with GE, I felt really prepared and ready. And then I read that book and it made me pause and really question everything that I thought I knew and everything that I was prepared to do. And I realized that what I was really stepping into with PMP was a structure and a methodology that made sense for me at the time, coming from the experience I had in the military. But the future leadership would demand something different of me. So I spent the last 5 years of my career actually kind of deconstructing my leadership style, recrafting my persona and the way in which I would act upon the world so that I could make that shift, so that I'd be ready for this moment right now.
That's what you just said is very, very powerful. Because when you talk about transformational leadership, which I don't even like to use the term anymore, you have to understand that every leader's only job, and by the way, at my core, I believe real adults don't need leaders, but that's another story. But the point is, every leader's job is to expand the capacity of the organization. What does that mean? It means expanding the capacity of the individuals that align to a process to be optimized and increase the revenue stream of the organization. And my point in all that is, the leader of the future will be the one who can enable and create an environment where people can become self-leaders, conscious self. Conscious only means knowing. I know who I am. I know why I'm here. I know my level of commitment. I take full accountability and responsibility for my reality. So what you just said, you need to understand how really important that is.
Yeah, to tie to what Kaylee said, and I know Neil will probably agree too, but my last assignment was with with Pacific Command headquarters, and in thinking about this strategizing and looking forward in the future, and then knowing how to respond, how to take action and stuff, is something that the military does really well, which, at a very high level, right? We have playbooks for any possible scenario that can ever exist, and we play those playbooks on a regular basis. It's kind of like what the intent is for this, but and you can think about it in a organization, environment, but you can also think about what is your playbook for your individual, for professional development as well, right? And then knowing how to pivot and knowing how to transition. When you see something happening, what's your skill set that you can actually navigate and transition to a different role and still be a huge impact. So it's a combination of both, and I think the military actually trained us really well on thinking about in that way. And for us, for the most part, we do transition pretty easily with our skill set from the military into the corporate world. We're very adaptable, very nimble, and Semper Gumby is basically our motto. So we're all about being able to do that in an effective way.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Comment, Sharon. And
Yeah.
so everyone, Sharon's a great contact that I've made working from GE, coming through Baker Hughes now. She's active in many knowledge networks, and so I was bringing her in for the perspective that she would have as she moves through a lot of different networks to give us this feedback. So I just want to thank you for your time. Thank you for everybody's individual time today. And so we'll go ahead and wrap it up from here. But be looking for a couple of things coming out of this. Be looking for our vlogcast releases, those segment iterations, strategy socials, what we're calling our vlogcast. Be looking for strategy challenges as we make our call to artifacts, and we look for people to emerge as enthusiasts and pioneers. Consider, do you have a strong bond network, 2 to 3, up to 5 people that you could really see benefiting in an experience, co-benefiting with working with one another along your strategic focus? We'd love to be able to sit down with you and workshop. So this is our invitation, and I hope everybody will walk away today feeling a little bit enacted in this journey with us and living this story.
And really appreciate the feedback everyone has given here. And we really would like to work upon it and be better with time. Thank you, guys.
Yes. All right, then.
Take care.
Take care.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Yes.
Thank you all. Take care. Bye.